But now, for the next part of this session, we would be starting our online panel discussion about psychological safety, about radical candor, and about feedback culture. So we have a board of three experts: Jukka, Kujala, who you already know, who has spoken up a few times. He's the head of people from Hoxhunt. Then, by the way, can you say hi, Jukka?
Hello, everybody. Jukka here from Hoxhunt.
Excellent. Nice to see you again. Then we have Katariina Korhonen from Smartly. She's the Chief People Officer at smartly.io.
Yeah, hi everybody. Nice to see you all.
Hi, welcome. And then we have Pekka Freese, who's a psychologist, entrepreneur, training companies, especially in the area of psychological safety.
Hi everyone, nice to see you. Sorry for joining just on time.
The wizard is never late or early. He's always right on time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Gandalf would say. So welcome to this panel discussion. And I'd like to see everyone ask questions from each other, comment on the topics that are raised. And people in the audience can also be active in the chat. So please feel free to participate and add your questions into the mix. But first, I would like to ask Katariina about the feedback culture that has been built into the DNA of Smartly from the very beginning, and especially about radical candor. So can you tell us a bit about your approach to feedback culture?
Yeah, feedback, giving and receiving feedback is super important at Smartly. We feel that candid feedback keeps us humble and hungry to learn. And we pretty much practice radical candor in our everyday work and feedback. This has been something that has been in Smartly's DNA since the very beginning. We challenge each other directly, and at the same time, we care each other. So we are doing it very respectfully, but it's very much something that we encourage everyone to do. That's the only way how we can learn and teach each other and widen our thinking. And this is also something that we do from the bottom to top and vice versa. So everyone gives feedback to each other. And we do this also, we don't give feedback to customers, but we seek feedback also very actively from customers so that we learn, and we share feedback in our daily meetings, Monday kickoffs, retros, Friday demos, and theme days. And naturally, we are communicating over Slack and that kind of channel. And then we have some surveys and more, but I can tell about those a little bit more later. But we actually provide feedback training to all Smartlies in the very beginning of the onboarding journey. So yeah, it's part of our DNA.
That's very interesting to hear. So radical candor can be considered quite extreme because the stages are like obnoxious aggression is better than ruinous empathy, for instance. So it's better to be obnoxious and say what you think than to kind of not say and hold back from saying something. And it can be quite demanding of people. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and that is something that we are actually monitoring quite a lot. But I would say that the key is that we communicate very respectfully with each other. It's about the topics and things that we are giving feedback. It's not like, or it shouldn't be so much like behavioral thing. So we try to communicate respectfully, take into account other person's situation. It doesn't mean when you give radical candor and when you are radical candor giving feedback, you cannot be mean or rude. It's usually it's easier to do face to face. Over Slack, you need to be even a little bit more mindful. But I would say that all the appraisals and appreciations are more than welcome to be public. But if you are giving like constructive feedback, we prefer to give that like 101 and do not call out people publicly. So when we share learnings for the whole company, we don't pinpoint individuals, but we focus on learnings on a larger scale. And when it's more like individual feedback, constructive feedback, we do it in one-on-ones. And as I mentioned, every Smartly go through feedback training and communication training in the beginning of Smartly journey, but we also repeat those things on a regular basis for all Smartly, so that we all remember how to give and receive feedback.
Thank you. So you also have a lot of people from different nationalities and different backgrounds. And can you give any tips on how to get different people from different cultures to talk same language in feedback?
Yeah, that's also a very, very good question. I would say we have actually, I just checked, more than 60 nationalities at Smartly. So it's a lot. I would say that having such a diverse group of people is great thing. It challenges our ways of working and thinking and how we can communicate to each other. Something that worked like 5 years ago doesn't necessarily work anymore, but I think that's good. How we get everyone communicates in the same way, we don't. Naturally, there are differences in regions and so on, but that's understandable. But what is common with everyone is our shared values. Smartly values are super strong part of our identity as a company, and everyone goes through also like culture and value trainings in the very beginning, and we talk a lot about our values, and we see those in our everyday work. So I would say, rather than sharing exactly same communication or feedback ways, we share the values and culture. But then, this being said, as I said, we give a lot of feedback training and communication training, and we have built those training on top of our values, so those would resonate well with our people. And we learn every day, so we also make amendments to our ways of working and how we give feedback over the time. So there, it's very different than it was 2015, but we are very, very open and honest with each other.
That's a great starting point to any growth story. But Pekka, you are training psychological safety to companies, and it has been quite a hip word in the past few years. So can you tell us, like, what does it mean, and why is it so important and interesting to companies?
I think the best way to grasp psychological safety is by asking yourself how welcome you feel in any group, in any team, in any situation where you are. So, to what extent do you feel yourself, your personality, your ways of working, your ways of being your emotions, your needs, your hopes, your goals, your mistakes, your achievements. How well do you feel those are welcome? And at the same time, when psychological safety is an individual experience or feeling, it's not just that, but it's how the individual's experience is created in the whole team and in the whole organization or any group where you are. So it's this social construct that's ever changing. So we have this experience how welcome we are, and that guides our action, which might be vulnerable. So we take risks. We step to that thin ice where something could go wrong, and in doing that, we trust other people. And then psychological safety is constructed in how the group and other people react to my vulnerability, or how they react to me being conservative and censoring myself. So not saying that thing that I have in my mind, not speaking up, not giving feedback. So how the group reacts to me and my actions is then how the group norms. We could speak about like vulnerability norms. So how we as a group, we believe and we think and we feel that what's welcome, what's okay, how do we cope with challenges, how do we cope with diversity, and so on and so on. So we then create this belief system, and that influences the personal experience of psychological safety. And I think this is something that is important to understand, that it's not just an individual experience, it's not just a group thing, but it goes both ways. And why is it important? That's a very good question. There's many answers to that, I guess. One of them might be that Google did a big study, and that brought up psychological safety. Microsoft did another big study, and they found 5 elements to be the core of teamwork. And those 5 elements are basically parts of psychological safety, all of them. But I see that it comes from a deeper need. It comes from a deeper need of connection. It comes from a deeper need for doing meaningful work together, to give space to this humaneness that all of us have. All of us are in core very curious and learning individuals and beings that want to create, want to contribute. And in order to do that, we need psychological safety, because curiosity and contribution and influencing things will always bring us to places where we see things from a different perspective. Of course, the why it's coming up right now has to do with what's happening in our world, in our working places. This acronym VUCA, like how we're starting to see that problems are all the time more volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous, makes the need for good communication and better collaboration more necessary, whilst also demanding much more from individuals. And in order to utilize this multiplicity of perspectives, we need the atmosphere where it's welcome. We need psychological safety, basically, where people feel it safe to take risks, safe to and welcome to bring their selves and all of their ideas and perspectives into play.
Right. And you probably need also a certain level of psychological safety to give radically candid feedback.
Surely.
Yes. Do you see any kind of friction points between these two ideas of psychological safety and radical candor?
Well, I see that they are very complementary, that psychological safety can foster a climate where candid feedback can be given. And it is needed for the candid feedback to be useful. Because if I don't feel safe and then someone gives me very direct feedback, it's easy to see that in a light that it's critique. And one thing that we are very sensitive to as social beings are what we could call like social risks or social threats. So if we feel that our status or our appearance somehow is threatened by anything, then we pull this defense, or then we attack. And it's easy to see very candid feedback in that way if you are a bit like uncertain about your position. And at the same time, then when there is candid feedback and it's given in a way that is appreciative, in a way that it is not critique, but it's really feedback, then it builds trust. It can build psychological safety, because candid feedback takes us into this bit more vulnerable space again, where it's like, oh wow, yeah, I have to actually look at this little bit painful point in myself, and in doing that, trust the others' well-meaning behavior and be open to that. And if we can do that again and again, it creates more trust. It creates more safety between us.
So you could actually make a claim that psychological safety and radical candor are pretty much like the same thing. Like,
no, I wouldn't say that at
almost,
all.
Sorry, I may misworded that, but you can pretty much attach them to each other. So you need psychological safety in order to feel safe to express. But then you also need psychological safety in order to receive that feedback. And you can imagine.
The difference, I would say, is that psychological safety can be created in multiplicity of ways, and radical candor can be one of those ways, but it's not necessarily the way. It's like feedback is one great way of building psychological safety, but then there is many others as well.
Great. Jukka, so can you tell us a bit about your thinking into these topics? I know you also think about psychological safety and feedback culture quite a bit. So what would be the Hoxhunt's overall objective in kind of creating this feedback culture?
I don't think we have like an objective necessarily. I might have something in my mind where I'd love to take the company towards, and some sort of vision for that. But maybe first and foremost, I believe we're like on a journey, and we're now at this phase of that journey, and we're trying to kind of take the next steps. And it's also interesting joining a company where I joined Hoxhunt last year. Basically, we were around 60 employees, and then COVID hit, and now we're going to be almost 100 employees during the end of this year. So I've kind of seen the company transition from this group of people who like everyone fits in the same room, and there was a lot of that like like early stage culture where you have the let's say first 3 to 4 to 5 to 10 people of the company, everyone working in the same room, really closely together. Everyone actually knows who the other person is. And they had been talking a lot about radical candor, for example. And I think they were able to make that work in that setting really well. But then when the company has transitioned so quickly and the headcount has increased, the amount of people have joined, I think it's been quite hard for us to then kind of keep that mentality, no matter how, for example, our founders would love us to be like radically candid. But it's a hard situation. I can give an example that if for example your founder is a very direct person and that person likes to just directly say what they think. And now especially we're working in this remote first way, everyone is on Slack, and then the founder directly says something like just bluntly there to someone, and that someone is a person who joined the company 2 months ago. So yes, the founder or the early stage employee might be thinking in a radically candid way, but the experience from the person receiving that feedback is very different. And they might even be kind of getting that feedback in a strange way, and it might be a very kind of offensive towards them. So my mindset, my philosophy has been shifting a lot towards this, like trying to create a feedback culture where each individual at Hoxhunt kind of owns their feedback. So, and that kind of links to everyone first and foremost owning their personal growth. So you can't kind of delegate the ownership of your personal growth to anyone else. That cannot take place. And in order for you to grow personally, you will be needing feedback to do that if you want to do it effectively. And in that sense, taking on this like model where kind of asking for feedback is the kind of responsibility of the individual, it actually gives them more control of their growth, because then they are in control of when they ask for that feedback, from whom they ask it from, and what is the scope of the feedback that they ask. So they don't get, for example, feedback at random times from, let's say, random people on random subjects, but they're actually able to take control of the feedback they receive is actually very relevant towards their own personal growth and the role that they're working on. So that's kind of my thoughts on what the kind of feedback culture and what the philosophy there should be based on the learnings I've seen. And great to have Kata, for example, here. I think we joined during the same month at Smartly, and always remember back on Warmth for like during my times at Smartly. And something I, for example, respect Kristo as the CEO and founder a lot is that whenever people shared something into let's say Slack or somewhere else on a Friday demos, Kristo was always asking like more questions, and he was always like very curious about, please tell me more, I want to understand more of what you're kind of trying to tell me. So then the person kind of giving the feedback just wants to give more of that feedback, and they feel very heard, and then there's a very sense of kind of openness and transparency in the company. But then when you have like a different type of personality there, who might be a bit maybe defensive, for example, and they aren't that curious towards this new information that's being shared, then that could lead to a situation where then the person reacts to someone sharing or giving feedback in this way, which then kind of prevents that person from sharing the feedback later on because they felt that it wasn't okay to share something. So it's super interesting how it's quite to the end based on the individuals who are in that team and in that organization and how they play together. And that's why I think that it is a journey that we're kind of on.
Maybe add a quick note there that what I have seen that has worked well is that when you give feedback or if you have retro or whatnot, when you more like celebrate that as a company, or is it if it's like Friday demos or what, if you make it like positive thing that okay, great that you shared, and even has gone very much south. But if you celebrate that, it gives like courage to everyone to share and make mistakes and also give and receive feedback. So I think that's important part also.
I would love to add to that one of the most important mechanisms in creating psychological safety is how we react to anything new, how we react to anyone giving feedback or bringing a new kind of idea or perspective. And even if we have a very different opinion, or even if we don't like the idea or like anything, giving that appreciation then gives the person, as Jukka was speaking, like the willingness to do it again. And that creates the norms where we can do that, and we believe it's the good thing. And even then we can challenge that. One of the good examples that I tell when I'm speaking about this is a situation that's very common to all of us, that a new person comes to a team and they suggest the same change in something, a process or anything like that everyone else has suggested. And how do we react to that? Is it like the classic that, oh yeah, we have tried that and it doesn't work? Or is it that, wow, hey, thank you so much for the idea, I really appreciate you speaking up. When we've tried this before, we've stumbled upon these challenges. How would you solve those? So it's these small things how we react that make a huge difference.
There's a great post on the chat from Tore, and I have a great example of what happened here at Hoxhunt. So on Slack, basically it was in the tech team, and then there was someone suggesting like a plan on how do we kind of fix a issue we were having, and then someone commented there that sounds like a shit plan. So, and the intention of the person like saying that comment out loud was like nothing negative and nothing like towards the individual who was like suggesting that plan. It was just like their way of kind of shouting out their first intuitive comment on something that was thrown out there. But what resulted afterwards actually was super interesting, because then a person in the team kind of spoke up and said that they feel that this wasn't appropriate language used, an appropriate way of discussing this issue. And then we actually took that discussion as a thread and linked it to our general channel, and we had like a wider discussion on the topic and what should be, what happened kind of here. And I think we were able to kind of go through that as a team, and then also the person realized that, okay, them saying something like this wasn't what they like actually meant, but it was this what they were thinking. But so we were able to kind of, there was like a fracture, and then we were able to kind of put that fracture together because we had a conversation together. So I think the use of words and things like that is super important. But I think also then the ability to kind of mend that fracture together is also super, super important as well. So people stating that, I'm sorry I did this and I should have been more mindful and things like that.
May I, Jaakko, also continue on this? Or
Sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking if you had...
No, this is good. This is great. I don't need to ask any questions now.
All right, that's good. What you are talking about brings to my mind that firstly, one of the things that is very important for psychological safety, and if I would have to give like one advice, what's the one thing to do, is to spend more time with the people, spend more time with your team, get to know them on individual level. Because if those two people would have known each other better, then the other person would immediately understand what that's a shit proposal, or how it was worded, what that would mean for that specific person, right? But if we don't know each other, then it's very easy to interpret all of these ideas, all of these perspectives from our own beliefs, from our own historical emotions, from our own history of experiences. And when we get to know people a bit more, we start to see more of the common and mutual humanity in us, and what's common rather than what's different. We have, as a psychological mechanism, we have a very strong bias to see what's different between me and other people, especially if we don't know them so well. But when we get to know the people, we can start to empathize, and we can start to see the mutual aspects.
I don't think we can hear you, Jaakko.
Sorry about that. Messed up with the mic. I can see Ture has raised his hand. Would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I had the right to speak since I'm not part of the panel here, but I thought I'd give it a shot and then
It's
get the
time for
feedback.
audience
if I was-
questions.
Great, obvious questions. No, it was just a thought. Well, I have a bad habit of asking by stating and then expecting people to disagree with me, so I'm going to do that. But just a kind of a more general, maybe higher abstraction level thought behind Jukka's great example is that what kind of I've noticed here also in a growing company with many people coming from big different backgrounds, that is that easy to kind of fall into the idea, let's say trap, but idea that if you strive for psychological safety, you want to make sure everybody avoids any kind of discomfort or in any way risking hurting someone's feelings. And well, that kind of inevitably results in a lot of feedback not being given because people just want to avoid those situations, especially want to avoid being the bad guy who hurts somebody's feelings. And okay, Jukka's example was a little extreme how this was brought up, but still kind of a good example of how precise the situation where somebody's feelings got hurt and they dared to express it out loud actually opened up the floodgates to many fruitful discussions. So the kind of one paradox is that to a certain extent, you have to be willing to hurt people's feelings or at least risk hurting people's feelings, though never intending to do that if you want to have a kind of candid feedback culture. And maybe if somebody wants to comment more on that thought, that would be interesting.
In between, I could maybe add that I don't think no one's feelings actually got hurt in the situation, not at least openly, but it was more actually a super great proactive measure for one of the team members. So they kind of came in and they said that someone's feelings could have been hurt in this situation. And I don't like the language that was being used. And I think that was an exceptional way of kind of speaking up in the situation and then discussing the problem, and that could have been there. But I might also be wrong that someone's feelings actually got hurt in the situation. But to my understanding, they did not.
What Ture you brought up is very important in this topic, and what I often mention is that psychological safety in itself is not a good goal, but it's a vehicle. It's in the same way a way of getting somewhere, such is radical candor as well. It's a way of building an atmosphere, building a climate where we can achieve high quality, where we can really utilize our diversity, where we can learn, where we can grow. And one of the other how I've developed a model of the elements that build psychological safety from all of the literature is positive challenging, or that is also sometimes referred to constructive tension. So we need to have that tension, and we need to have also certain standards of working and putting ourselves out there and doing our best in order to even have psychological safety. Because if we don't have that, then what happens is that our norms start to be conservative more and more and more. And we need tension, we need conflicts to recreate those norms and to find what fits us in this situation. And it's like it's a creature that lives all the time. And I had a great discussion today with a leader that I'm coaching. I'm also coaching individual leaders on people leadership, and we had a really great discussion on what's the importance of conflict. And I see that like no team, no relationship, no organization, no group is healthy if there is no conflict. It's an absolutely important part of social settings, and it's one of the very basic principles of our universe: chaos and order, and we have to have that.
Right. So we need to bounce ideas and get that intellectual friction while we are actually decreasing social friction. And that's one way to think about psychological safety. But it also, like all of this, to get people to express openly, it takes leadership, it takes example. And I'd like to ask Kata about an interesting practice that I've heard you have at Smartly, which is the management Ask Me Anything sessions. So can you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah, we have like monthly happy hours, Ask Me Anything. And we do one in EMEA APAC time zone. We just had one this week. And then we have one on America's time zone. And we are using slido.com there, and people will add their questions there. So far, we have always asked people to ask questions with their own names. So those are not like anonymous questions, but they are people are asking pretty much anything. It's Ask Me Anything, and I have seen quite a lot of different questions. And sometimes it's good channel to get direct feedback also from employees, sometimes raising very good topics, open discussions, also clarify things, and people are super active in those sessions. It's usually 1 hour. We go through 10 to 20 questions, depends on how big questions those are. But our whole executive team always prioritize those, and we want to be there. So that's very, very good channels. Yeah.
Do you have any example of some question that was particularly interesting?
Oh, that's good question. Yeah, I would say maybe interesting areas. It's sometimes people are asking very business heavy questions, which challenges us and our thinking, and then a lot of people related questions relating to DNA initiatives. People are interested in about compensation, and also what kind of strategical plans we have for the company. Usually people are asking questions that we haven't maybe necessarily proactively shared, and it sometimes also challenges us to think that should we be a little bit more proactive in certain areas and so on. And for example, D&I is good example, because we are doing a lot of D&I work at Smartly, and we have a lot of measurements in the place that we are monitoring, and naturally there's always more to do, but we are we are doing quite a lot at the moment. But what we learned in the latest Ask Me Anything, that we should actually communicate a little bit more what we are doing in that end. And that was a very good learning experience for our executive team, that we need to also remember to communicate for the broader group. Not everyone knows, and not everyone is part of the people team or so. So that was very eye-opening session last time.
That's interesting. Thank you. Jose is raising his hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention here, like, I think related to many of the other themes we've covered here today, just like my understanding is about those Smartly Ask Me Anything sessions, that you mentioned, Kata, that they are super active, but that also did not happen automatically. So there, like, it has required building that safety that anyone could go and ask the CEO, why did you do this, and so on.
You are very spot on, Jose, because I have been with Smartly a little bit over 5 years now, and I remember that there were times that those weren't very active sessions, and no one showed up. And nowadays those are like it's always the full hour, and then we have follow-up questions because we cannot cover all the questions that we get. And it's also interesting to see that in practice that everyone can ask direct questions from CEO, challenge Christo, and I think it's very refreshing. And but we are doing this feedback thing also in other ways, like pulse surveys and network analysis and so on, and maybe highlight from network analysis, which we just received the results, that yes, we have a lot of development areas, but what I was very happy to see was that we don't the communication flow is very good between like junior level 1 to executive team level. So it was full green when we analyzed that where we can do better or where not. I was very happy to see that we still have that feeling at Smartly, that people communicate a lot between different like job levels. So that's, maybe you can see that from the Ask Me Anything sessions too.
Excellent. We are actually running out of time. It has been a wonderful 45-minute talk with you. Thank you very much to our panel of experts.